Welcome to Morning Joe with Tom, with your host, Thomas Chappell. Get ready to listen to real-life stories from inspiring leaders who have overcome incredible challenges to rise to the occasion. If you're ready to add some pep to your morning with a new outlook on leadership, then grab your cup of coffee. It's time to be inspired. Here's your host, Thomas Chappell.
Hey, Kimberly.
Hello.
Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you for
seeing you again.
Yes, thank you, Thomas, for the invitation. I'm very excited about this lead development that you're doing for leadership. That's wonderful.
Thank you. So, I've had the pleasure of kind of knowing you. We met through PCCI, and it was great having some very in-depth and interesting conversations. And that's how I kind of got to know your message. But for the listeners, would you want to share a little bit about what it is about yourself and what your mission is?
Sure. So I am a founder of We Stand Guard and the author of several Say No and Tell books. And they teach boundaries and personal body safety to help prevent child sexual abuse. And you can look over here, the mission or our vision is we want to educate children and grown-ups with boundaries and personal body safety tools to help prevent child sexual abuse. And we go about that by educating children and grown-ups, equipping the communities with boundaries and prevention strategies, skills, and tools. And we want to empower everyone to talk about it so kids are safer, because what we're finding in this movement is the children and the families and the organizations and the communities that can comfortably talk about this topic can be safer.
Okay. All right. So what brought you to serve others in the way that you do today?
Well, the main inspiration that comes to mind was in one of my teaching jobs, I was an elementary health educator, and I taught the unit personal safety. And as a health educator, the way we define that is personal safety is the prevention of child sexual abuse, by definition, including both physical and non-physical contact child sexual abuse. So for instance, when a child is exposed to pornography, that is traumatizing and is a form of child sexual abuse.
Okay.
And the program I taught was so well done, tastefully done, child friendly, age appropriate, wasn't fear based, it was empowering. And all of a sudden I had this idea pop into my head about a butterfly, and probably almost 10 years later, I had the opportunity to begin actually working on this vision that I had to create something light and bright and colorful with positive life skills, so that we can approach this topic that's very sensitive in a child-friendly way and with child-friendly language in an age-appropriate way, without the fear and the scare tactics. And there's really no need to even include reproduction, in my opinion, because when you have a boundaries approach, it's very simple. It's about your private stay private, and they have special rules.
Right. Okay. All right. Cool. So for my leadership audience, I know that you had kind of prepared some of the study that you had done through Nehemiah, and you wanted to kind of share some of that. So, kind of kick us off a little bit about, how
Sure.
that integrates into what you're doing.
Sure. Well, I know, Thomas, when we met, I had shared with you a story about my friend Lucy, and we're considering having me come in and train like their vacation Bible school volunteers that work with the kids. And she told me that she had been at one of my conferences, or one of a conference that we were both at, where I had a booth, and she bought my books, and we had been emailing. And she said, Kimberly, I have to tell you, I went to a leadership ministry conference leadership training ministry conference. And that weekend, we all were getting to know each other and we were sharing our testimonies. And she said many to most of the people who were sharing had a story of child sexual abuse in their past.
Mhm.
And it really gripped her heart. She had not experienced that. But when she saw how challenging it was for each person to find their voice and put into words what happened and to share in front of people publicly, she thought, I really wonder, and I think that those of us who have not experienced this, I think we can help because we can come alongside and help people find their voice, share their voice, and encourage them, and also be a voice on their behalf. So, because that intervention, recovery, and healing piece is definitely been happening over the last couple of decades. We can think of the stories in the news, and we're heading into that season, way overdue. However, we're heading into the season where we want to bring in and focus on the front end, the prevention education. And we want to start getting in front of this, and we want to start going on the offensive and not playing the defensive. So this is not to minimize anyone, where it takes a lot of bravery to come to terms with in your own mind and even with yourself and say, okay, this happened. And then you take the step and you share it with one other person usually. And then hopefully they believe you. And then maybe you enter into some kind of healing group or working with a specialist. And then some of us are able to speak out about, publicly. And so it's not easy, and it's not like I said, it's a sensitive topic. However, there's ways that we can go about it where it can be empowering for everyone rather than feeling like this idea of, oh, that just happens to those people over there, or you don't need to air your dirty laundry, or some of those myths, or because of the discomfort that might arise. However, the discomfort we may feel in the moment of sharing or hearing is not anything compared to what a child is going through. And that's the part we want to keep in the forefront, is we've got to think about the children in the next generations.
That is so real. That's very touching. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
So I know that your focus is on children and prevention. Talk about some of the platforms that you like to speak at. So any of the listening audience out there may be able to.
Sure. Well, so this is sort of new and up and coming. I'm definitely looking for strategic partners this year. I'm doing a number of co-webinars where it's kind of like cousins with, our work is cousins of each other, if that makes sense, where we cross promote. Like this month, I'm doing one with Alejandra from NECMEC, National Center on Missing Exploited Children. In May, I'm doing a co-webinar with Pam Strickland, NC Stop Trafficking. So if anyone's interested in doing any kind of co-webinar or a podcast like you and I are doing, Thomas, sometimes when we share with the people that already know about it, it's like we're just exchanging the same air back and forth. But we really want to get that fresh audience and fresh, reaching, people afresh in a new, with hope. And also this past week, I just also trained the leaders of what's called Safe Families, and they are fostering kids, and they're nationwide. And so they found, I stole out of my books, and they have some connections with possibly following up in their churches and training like church volunteers, Vacation Bible School volunteers, church ministry staff. Anyone that's in an organization where there are children. So like one of the key things you would walk away with is a little poster that talks about guidelines for interacting with children. Something simple as the bathroom procedures, where you're not only protecting your organization, but you're protecting the children, but you're also protecting your organization. And people are set up to be successful to know how to interact. So that's the professional side of speaking. And then also I do workshops with parents and caregivers. And sometimes those can be more of like an intimate group. Like if you are a parent or an aunt or anyone who cares about kids, you're like, oh, I know about 5 or 6, 8 friends that are interested in this, and just email me and we get together and do a workshop.
Yeah. Well, I know a little bit about your business, and it gets very frenetic, right? So things, it can be feast or famine at times as far as
Right.
as far as moving things forward. But kind of tell me how that as a leader that you keep that sense of mission going forward.
Well, when you first asked me, and through these wonderful coaching classes I've been in, they say, well, have you considered yourself to be the product? I'm like, no, it's books. Well, you guys are convincing me. So as a leader with a mission, whether we have a product or service or whatever it is, the more we work on ourselves and know ourselves and study wonderful leadership, we are that voice. I mean, we are that model, that example. And that, whether we want to be front and center or not, that's just part of it. And so I was very honored that you asked me, and I was ready, I think, to do this, because I started seeing myself, okay, I'm as much as part of this as the books that I've written. And so what does that begin to look like? And then I reflected back on the 8 years, because I began researching this in January of 2015. I researched for like a year and a half before I wrote. Well, within that year and a half, it took me a year and a half to launch the books. But so when I looked at Nehemiah, he had 8 qualities of leadership that actually, it's the Word in the Life Study Bible. Thomas Nelson is the one who would weave in and out all of these commentary. And one of the things he says is that leaders conduct research. So I started to read this, and I read all his points, and I thought, I've experienced all of this. And when I look at talking about Nehemiah, I look at it more as how I can connect to him and how could I be more like him. And so, the story of he had heard what happened in Jerusalem in just the shattering of everything. And so one of the first things he did is he went and he assessed the damage. And he quietly walked around the city by night without fanfare. And he surveyed the problem to come up with possible strategies. Well, one of the things I did is I went on Amazon in 2015. I ordered like 25 books back to the 1960s on body safety just to see what had been done. And I learned out of that, my vision became clear. I knew I wanted something light and bright and positive. That would be something different. And not only do I have a story in my books, but I have the scenarios to role play. So that's one key concept, is leaders conduct research to see the history even of maybe the person that was in the position before you. Interview them, study where the company has been, study what other successful people have done, and learn the history, learn their stories, and then, do your research so that you're coming in building on maybe other people's positive things. Or if you're just starting out something brand new, you can still research others that have had, similarities, I guess.
Yep. So in essence, you're kind of building community basically along with that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, sometimes people say, like, the authors in the books, like, these are my friends. People really love to read books because they become your friend, right? Yeah. You look at the bookshelf, you're like, look at all my friends. So yeah, those were my first friends. Is I bought all those books and I began emailing people that had written articles online, and I knew I wanted to have a prayer group right out of the gate. And so, of course, usually with these kinds of endeavors, it begins with family and friends, and that's wonderful. And, you get all that support and they believe in you. And then you bring it out and you test it in the market. And then you get all the feedback, and, you know, I had several years of making changes and people looking at this little word and this little phrase, as they should, given this sensitive topic. And I would, you know, sift through and weigh. And then even at one point, I had feedback about that maybe, you know, a set of my books were religious. And so I knew that God wanted to reach all children with this message. And so I developed a general audience set that can be in the public schools and things like that, not advocating anything secular, but promoting basic body boundaries and staying clear of and clean of, you know, the political, the religion, just things like that, that might, where someone might not read the book because it miss the point, miss the message. So I have the general audience set of Say No and Tell, and then I have the faith-based set of Say No and Tell. So I say all that to say that my community is very eclectic. And when I think of my newsletter list, there are, you know, anti-trafficking people on there from all over the world, because I've been to a handful of conferences and these speakers and these workshops, and they come from all over. And there's professional children advocacy center workers, social workers, counselors, teachers, medical professionals, parents, caregivers, and just even, I don't know, just people that are interested, because unfortunately this experience is no respecter of persons. It happens across all socioeconomic kinds of things. And so I realized when I'm building community, I was thinking of what is the most common denominator we can unite on, and is we love children and we want to protect children, and that is a unifier. Right. So that's a helpful way to build community.
Well, as you've been building this, I mean, it's come with its share of, you know, like you said, trying to make sure you stay out of the politics of it all, but you've also met with your share of adversity. So, you know, what can you share that leaders could use to kind of discuss that whole getting around that adversity piece and working through it?
That's a good question. So one more thing I'll say about leaders to connect it to Nehemiah with the building of the community. In his newsletter, when he would talk to the people, he would say we and us when it came to the problem and the solution. And he was also building the bridge between the king and any class division. So he wasn't talking down to the people. And so naturally, somehow I knew, and I guess I just felt like this was a problem for humanity. And I like to use those words a lot in my newsletters. And I'm constantly thanking people. Thank you for opening this newsletter. Thank you for sharing. You have 100 other things you could be doing. Even if you just post this one thing, you could help a child. So the we and the us is helpful for community. And there are people that are not going to like what you're doing and feel threatened. And, you know, when we think about the spiritual realm of God's plan and the enemy's plan, it's two different things. And so if you don't mind me turning in my pages here a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with Nehemiah, he had Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites. They heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, and they became very angry. And they all conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. Nevertheless, we, Nehemiah speaking, made our prayer to God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. So I guess the visual I have for that is when they were building the wall, guess what they had in their hands? One hand they had a spear, and one hand they had a hammer. And so while you're building, you've the spear representing wisdom, discernment. I was just speaking with a lady today that I met with, and she said, you know, I was very naive when I started going into this, and I cannot be naive. You know, there are people that are acting like they want to help me, or they're acting like they want, but they actually just really want something from me, or if I do give and support them, where actually is that money going? Are they actually helping the children? And so it's not even a skepticism, but it's just more of a understanding who are your allies and understanding who are your adversaries. So
Yeah, getting that discernment.
yes, and so this group that was against Nehemiah, they had a monopoly and control. And after 70 years of the exile, they felt like they were being threatened, and they didn't want the walls to be rebuilt. But Nehemiah, he defended and he kept working. And so there are powers that be, and like I think of something obvious like Pornhub, that there's been a lot of battles going on, and MindGeek is kind of this conglomerate that owns a lot of these pornography sites. Well, they fight tooth and nail against anything that has to do, and I mean, there's talk out there now about, and this has been my concern from the beginning, about normalizing and even maybe legalizing the age of consent to be very young children. And so these people, for somehow, some way, have a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of influence. So that's why I like to be connected with the National Center for Sexual Exploitation. They're very much involved with law and policy and putting out different bills and taking a few minutes to sign those kinds of things. It feels like literally like chipping away at a massive boulder. However, when I think about the adversity, and I've wept many tears, I've run to the bathroom having to throw up because of the things that I've seen and heard as I've researched and as I keep up with it. It's so heartbreaking, and I have to take breaks from it at times. Is I have to stay focused on the children, and I have to stay focused on that one lost sheep, how the shepherd in Jesus, he goes after the one that was lost. And when you reach one, Thomas, whether it's someone like you or me or a child that you care about, it's not just that child's life that's changed. It's their whole sphere of influence and possibly their whole family tree, generation after generation. So that's how powerful this kind of work is. And what an opportunity we have as leaders to remember the one and work with that one at a time. And so the adversity is going to come, and not to get focused on, like I know I've applied to go to this conference, this Catholic conference one time, and I got feedback on my book, and there was like a phrase she didn't like, and I said, well, I can change it or whatever. So basically it was a rejection. Next thing I know, 2 years later, my dad had driven the books down to an archdiocese in Detroit, and Sharon emails me. We had been connected, and she's like, oh, do you want to go to this conference? And so the very conference that I had been denied was someone else's decision making. She almost pushed me to the forefront because she's at the archdiocese. And and so it was funny because when I got there, I joked, I said, I should have just put out a banner and saying, Sharon wanted me to be here. Because I was new to the group, and so but there was an adversity obstacle, because I have felt from the beginning that God wants these books could really help the Catholic families, and to be turned down to the very thing that I was thinking was a major part, but then it came back around. Right.
So, you've spoken quite a bit about serving people and all. How would you say that through all of that service that you're helping encourage the celebration piece of your leadership dynamic?
Well, so when I look at what Nehemiah did, and I'm studying, I don't know if you guys have ever done a Sandra Recker Bible study, but she's the Bible studies head at Westmont College right now, which is where I went, Bible studies, and the department. And I just did her Epic of Eden Psalms, and really learned a lot about the lament and the importance of the lament for the healing process of any kind of grief or trauma. And then now also I'm reading about the Old Testament. And do you know, there were so many feasts and parties, and I mean, these people knew I mean, that would take 7 days, to celebrate and do different things and to remember God. It was all, so much of it was about remember him and remember what I've done, and those oral story traditions, passing them down. And so what Nehemiah had Ezra read from the law, which kindled the godly sorrow and the changes of the heart, followed by praising God. They had choice food and an amen chorus rejoicing together. And he also sent food to the poor so that everyone was able to celebrate. And so, you see how, so the Psalms, 70% of the Psalms are laments. The Psalms is the most quoted book in the New Testament. And then you have the book of Lamentations, and then you have Jeremiah. So he began with the repentance. He began with the lamentations. He began with the lamenting and the sorrow. And because it says when we confess our sins to one another, then we will be healed. And I learned through my recovery process that it's not just the sins I've done, but any sins that have been done against me. It's not like I'm confessing them, but I am sharing them out loud with someone, because when you share things out loud, that's when it begins, those experiences begin to lose its power. If you keep it in the darkness, it can continue to hold tight. But if you bring it into the light, like any wound, the sun and the light can begin to heal it. And you realize you're not alone, and you start to realize the lies about shame and whatever it is that's been going on. But then after that, they had a party. And so I have to be honest, I'm not very good at this part. I'm working on, we read the book Essentialism in my day job. I work for an executive business coach, and I highly recommend it. Greg McEwen, life-changing book. And we all had to pick one thing out of the Essentialism book that we'd be doing. And I was like, all right, I need to pick the play. I need to play more. And so I was working on that last year, and both my husband and I just remembering to play and bring in the humor and with that, the celebrations and the praises. And so things as simple as I have my prayer groups that pray for me, and I'll text them a victory or something that went well. And that's a form of a celebration for me. Sometimes my husband, he knows I like to eat at Sassoul's, which is Mediterranean food. I could eat that all day, every day. And he'll go get me a plate of Sassoul's. And it's doesn't have to be, well, I would have loved to have been involved with those 7-day ongoing celebrations. I think our schedules are a little too tight in our westernized culture these days. However, carving out and being purposeful and being intentional to celebrate the small, medium, and big size wins, it can become fuel and the energy to keep going, because my closest friends and supporters and prayer warriors, they know I have not wanted to quit, but I felt like giving up like a thousand times, it seems like. And I've realized I can't do this alone. And that's what I tell people when I say, no, it's a sensitive topic and I won't get graphic and all this, but I cannot do this alone. And so I keep reaching out. And the work that you and I have done together has been life-changing for me on a business level, to work on the business, not just be working on in the business, not just be focused. Yeah, working in the business and working on the business is different. So working on the vision and the mission, and that's where I've needed the help. Is I'm an educator and I have kids for books, and I'm learning business and I have leadership. It's just, channeling it into a whole new venue. And I need people like you and people that have different skill sets. And we in this movement need other people's voices. And that's why Thomas and I wanted to do a podcast like this and branch out. Whether you can relate or not, we're just asking you to join us in any way that you can, because unfortunately the problem is a lot bigger maybe than we realize. And we're in the midst of everybody unifying. This is not a competition when it comes to this kind of work. It's a unifying thing. And yes, there's David and Goliath, and we love that. And that's pretty much how we are right now, is taking those pebbles and those stones. And, if we could just add in more to David's, in the modern day today, add more Davids and add more to the army. The children are counting on us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's our future, right? It's our legacy. So
It is.
So yeah, this has been a wonderful interview, and I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.
How could people reach out to you and contact you for more information?
So I guess I want to just close with, why I admire Nehemiah is he was all about the rebuilding.
Okay.
And rebuilding of the walls. And if you can think of ways in your life that have been broken and how God has been able to rebuild in your life, that's a connection point for all of us. There's a real opportunity for us to go back to the roots of Genesis, where it says God created us both male and female in his image to reflect him. And he's calling us back to those roots of he knows how he designed us, and he knows how to protect the relationship with him and with each other. And so I just invite you to maybe see it as a way of helping to rebuild the walls of what it is to be human, what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, and what it is to reflect God and his love. There's just a lot of confusion and a lot of hurting and a lot of wounds, and we need everybody's voices. And so in terms of contacting me, I do have a website, westandguard.com.
Okay.
And a quick step you can take is sign up for my free personal safety family plan download. And that will get you started right away. It's like 5 steps. You're already starting to protect your family, your community, your organization, or you can share it with people. And then I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm trying to be on Pinterest, not quite really developed that yet. You can email me about workshops or I tell people, whether you've prayed for me, you have told me an encouraging word, you've made a social post, you've counseled me with my business, any skill or sentiment or gesture in that way, like I said, serves as energy and fuel. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep going. I got my friends, I got my people, I'm not alone. And so you can sign up for the newsletter, obviously purchase the books and share with, I have little postcards, We Stand Go postcards that tell like a little overview of the books, and I keep them in my car and I pass them out at the bank, oh, do you have children? Or if I see someone at the grocery line, they have little kids, here you go. One night on Halloween, I went out and I was by the community pool and I just handed out the postcards that night. And I didn't know how everyone would be, but I would say 9 out of the 10 parents were like, wow, thank you. What a better night to pass out the cards, right?
Yep.
Everyone's walking around, there's scary people and strangers. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all the little things that make big differences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I will definitely put the links in the show notes so that folks can reach out to you.
Okay.
And again, I want to thank you for being on the show and would love to have you back again someday.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the work that you do. You've helped me tremendously in my business and understanding clarity about next steps, but also just unique, customized insights. And you listen very well. And you're at a point in your life and your career in the season of life where you have a lot of experience. And it's just unique when I meet with you and we talk about things. So I just encourage anyone out there listening to get a meeting with Thomas if you can and find out his story.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
It's true.
You're awesome. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to Morning Joe with Tom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. See you next time for more real life stories and inspiration on Morning Joe with Tom.